that you told me you didn't understand routing. Yeah, I've remembered it was routing. Just a minute. Get room sober. Mm. So I'm sorry about that. Mm. All right. So you told me you had not understood routing, and I'm going to start with routing itself. You see, when you look at our project structure from start to finish, no, this is not our project structure. You will notice that we've categorized everything where it needs to belong, and at the end of the day, we end up having a structure of files that does not deserve to look the way it is when we get back into uh, the website. So when people visit the website, they need a structured way in which they write their URL. For example, when you look at this website called Jolisa Academy, when you that called Jolisa Academy, and then you try to go into the admin panel, you would see that these people have determined that their admin panel
Can you please show your screen?
as they've determined this in what we call routes, and that's what routes is all about. If I'm to open if we to open our project, just a moment. Jesus. Let me go back a little bit behind. I was saying that I'm trying to bring out something that you told me you didn't understand routes, and I understand you understood routes, but you don't understand the PHP syntax. And this takes me some bit of classes back when we talked about PHP syntax, and I've started from the very basics of PHP. So I've said that we have variables in PHP and we declare them with this dollar symbol. And PHP opens with this tag and PHP closes with this tag. By default, a PHP variable is declared by a dollar sign and then you give it. And we've learned that in PHP, we have the following variable tags. We have what we call strings, we have what we call integers, we have what we call floats, we have what we call booleans, we have arrays, we have objects, and then we have null. Strings are printed the way they are, mostly in those double quotation marks, where you can say hello world. And then um, we also have integers that can be whole numbers, the way you see this 42. We have floats that can be any decimal point number like 3.14, which is the pi number. We have booleans, which are either true or false. We have arrays that are declared in these box brackets. Then we have objects that can be classes somewhere else that you can call and you reuse. Then we have a null one, which means nothing. So there's a special primitive data type in PHP that means nothing. We are back to basics. So when you declare such a variable and you echo that, if we ran, let me first start XAMPP, our local server. Now, I told you that if you have Linux, Richie, I'm kind of requesting you help me connect this cable to that, then you start the computer, please. Uh, I was saying that if you have Linux, you don't need XAMPP, but since you're you're on Mac, you need XAMPP. And on XAMPP, you just need to start Apache, which is the system that runs Linux sort of system in our system. Then we start our database. We need it so much, and we start also FileZilla for our files to be passed to the local server. As long as these three are running, our system is running. So when we come here and we say, let me first close the number of tabs I have here. If we come here and we say local host slash sports scope, I'll teach you some other time that sometimes you don't need to say localhost. You can create a sort of virtual server on your, okay, it's on Windows, and I don't need to teach you that since you're on Windows. So this is demo.php. We shall say demo.php. So if we run our code in the browser, we get the value 2, as you can see. This means that it has echoed the variable var. Now, we also learned that in PHP we support what we call expressions. For example, um, you can say that var1 equals to, let's say 3.14. That colon acts as a terminator. And then you call var2 to be something like, let's say, 72. Now you can say var3 equals to var1 plus var2, and then you echo var3. What does this do? This is an expression, plus is a special expression in PHP that does addition. And we know it very well that this will really print out var3 as whatever is, oh, sorry. I wanted to comment out this and that. All right. So for this, we know very well that this will add up var1 and var2. We know very well that this is an integer and this is a float, but it will be able to print out a float, which is 75.14, which is a float. But you can choose to say that I want my output to be an integer. So how would you be able to do that? You can say integer var3. Puppy, what's wrong? She's coming back. Let us try to refresh this and we see. So it will print out this to the nearest whole number. This shows that you can actually dictate what is the data type you want. Now, we also know that we can do subtraction, division, and we can also do what we call, if you added here a percentage symbol, it will do what we call a percentile. A percentile is the remainder you get when you divide var1 by var2. Since var2 is bigger, let's do this. var2, and then we say var1. So if we run this, you'd realize that the remainder is 0 every single time you divide that by that. But it could be a decimal number. If we ran this, the answer could be a little different. Okay, the remainder is 0. You get a remainder of 0 every single time you divide 72 by 3.14. Puppy, sorry. Sorry. So those are some of the basics of PHP that probably might have scared you from uh, doing PHP. Now let us advance this a little. In PHP, I started by saying that we have, I said we have what we call local variables, which are defined with a function accessible within that function. We have global variables, and then we have what we call static variables, which are defined within a function. Lately, in the latest versions of PHP, they've included what we call super globals. These are predefined variables that are only and only accepted. They are predefined variables that are pre-made in PHP, and they are reserved words for them. As for them, we declare them by writing an underscore after the $sign. Let me first take out this dog. Puppy, you come. All right. So local variables are defined within a function and accessible within that function. Beyond that function, you can't access them. We shall see that. Global functions are defined outside any function and accessible throughout the entire script. Let's give an example of one. If we had, and I hope by the end of this you shall be able to uh, understand functions, so that moving forward we have no issues with functions. So if we declare a function called number, and number is probably, let's say, 10, and then we declare a function, yes, this is good, and then we declare a function called my function, and in my function we are declaring a global, you see this word global, function called num. We are trying to access this variable as a global variable, and then we equal num. If we return our function here, now this is a function that is being returned here, and every time we say my function, it should carry this entire thing. Remember, my function in this place is an object. You get me? So num has been inherited inside, and num at this point carries the value 10. So when we equal it, we get output 10. And indeed, when you come to here and then you try to reload, you should get a value 10. Back to this. Now, what if we really wanted um, num? What if inside here we said mm, probably something like num plus plus? So this num plus plus, I don't know whether you're able to see this. This num plus plus means that get num and then add one on top of it, so that it keeps on increasing. In programming, we call it incremental, and this should give us 11. Now, what if we said something different? What if we said plus plus num? It's the same output actually. It's the same output. The output would be 11. Now, the difference is, what's the difference between num plus plus and num? What is plus plus num and then num plus plus? What's the difference between the two? The difference between the two is that, I'll explain it here. With x plus plus is the what we call post incremental, and then x plus plus means pre-incremental. What does that mean? With x plus plus, we start with the exact value of that variable, then we add on top of it. Whereas plus plus, we first add on top of it before we get to the answer. So if we had an array, if this was an array and then we added on top of it, we would get that value, then we add on it. It's a little different. It wouldn't make sense for a small value like this. Now, assuming we said num equals to 8. At this stage, what is the value of num? Is it the num that was declared before the function, or is the num that is inside of a function? That is very important. We refresh, we get 9. Why? When num was 10, as it came inside the function, as a global function, it was redefined. So it became a static function, literally. So at this stage, num became 8, and when we increased it, it became 9. Now 9, it's not a 10 anymore. In fact, if we came here and we said echo num, now at this point, inside here, let's see. Copy. I'm teaching. I'm teaching. Inside here, num is 8, and then 8 turns into 9. But if we came outside here and we refresh, okay, num got a 10 out, num considered an 8, then it was increased by a 1 and became a 9. Now num is no longer this none, and this became a local variable to its own self. It's isolated up here. It's not known anymore in here. Now, what if we change this num to static? It was initially global. If we changed it to static, what would be our output? Control refresh. It would be 9, 10. What's the 9? The 9 is for what we get out of the function. And then the 10 is num recalls that it was 10 before it became anything. So this wasn't affected by the static variable inside here. So I hope you understand the difference between global and static. All right. So let's move on to functions. No, 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 don't bite me. No, 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 don't bite me. Let's move on to. Don't bite me. What's up? Thank you very much. Let's move on to functions. Da, da. Control X. Okay. Let me get all this and I paste it right here. I'm trying to comment out code, but it has refused. Let me just delete it out. All right, now let's look at functions. We also have different types of functions in PHP as follows. We have what we call private functions. And these can only be accessed within a class. Now, what's the difference between a function and a class? A class is a way of, how can I say, clustering together. A class is a way of clustering together related code into one big ball or class that you can reuse anywhere else, so that every single time we call that class, it comes with all its functions within it. Then the next one is we have what we call private protected functions. These can be accessed within the class and they are defined in by any subclass that extends that class. Then thirdly, we have what we call public classes. The most popular one can be accessed from anywhere, including outside of that class. These are very important, especially when it comes to object-oriented programming. You create a certain function on your website or application that can be reused anywhere. Okay, so most of the functions that we are going to be dealing with shall be public functions. Another thing you need to know about the syntax is these curly brackets. The purpose of these curly brackets is to group together different things. For example, if I said var equals to 10, for example, then I said if, now you want you to look at this, every time we use if, we put into bracket, what are we trying to create a condition for? Papi, sit down. So let's say if var is less than 5, what if we said something like this? Echo, what if we said something like this? That if var is less than 5, echo variable is greater than 5. Okay, if we run this, I hope we don't get an error. Okay, it's a syntax error, obviously. They are forcing us into adding these brackets to categorize together that, and then here we can add this. So what is this saying? This is saying that if variable 5 is greater than 5, you print out, you echo variable is greater than 5. And let us see, control refresh. We still have an error on line 43. Sorry, I forgot the dollar sign. Good. Now, let me first remove these curl brackets now. So what do you think this will print? It would print variable is greater than 5. And indeed, that's what it does. It prints variable is greater than 5. Now, what if the variable is, if the variable is greater than 100? Print variable is greater than 100. Now, you can recall that ours is not greater than 100. What would it do? If we refresh, it will not do anything. Why? You've not told it what to do when something does not meet your condition. Now, what if I want to say that this variable, Papi, please, I will slap you. Now, what if I want to say that in case this condition is not met, what do? I bring together this into one curl bracket like that. Then I say else if it's else, actually I can just say else echo variable is not less than 100. So with this, I'm tired of these AI suggestions. With this, it has a provision in case the condition is not met. But what made the difference? What made the difference was this curl bracket from here up to here. It put together whatever is under the condition and then put else somewhere else. So we always use these curl brackets to group together related data into one singular block. Okay, so let's go back to router.php so that you can create your own router. Why are you biting me? Just a minute. Come. First have some rest. So let us look at the router class. We have a class declared, and then we said these groups together everything under it. It's a grouper. And then we have our first function, which is a private function, and we are saying the private function is an array, and we are calling it route, and it is an empty array. This means an empty array. And then we are declaring the same another one which is private, and we are calling it non-phone handler. You can realize that most of these we call them professionally methods. If you call here, they will say method or something. Most of these methods are most of these methods are to do with what happens when someone visits a page. This one will handle all routes. We want all routes to be in an array. This one is ensuring that not found handler is null by default, and allowed handler is null by default. Then we get the string of the path that someone has visited on our website, which is the link someone has entered. Then we also get a list of all routes that have been named. Then we start, leave alone these names, constructor, blah 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 blah, but just take them in a literal form. We created a function, and this function is supposed to be construct or constructor, which we want to return views path as a string. And inside this function, what are we doing? We are mapping the views path and removing, and then we are trimming it so that it's separated by that slash. I hope you get that. So you need to understand these key things like arrow trim. What do they do? Then you write them down. And we know that it's a slash that separates. Then this dot between anything in PHP is called concatenation. Its purpose is to combine two strings together. That's what that dot does. I'll go back to our illustration. If we have mm, if we have a variable called first name, and first name is Jakisa, and then we have another variable, and the last name is Barak. We can construct a full name by concatenating. You see that dot? By concatenating first name and last name, then we can echo the full name, so that when you run this in your browser, you should get these names combined together. Oh, sorry, control refresh. So we got one variable plus another. This variable was called dot, an empty string, which means space, dot last name, and that's how we got the full name. So that's exactly what is happening here. We are getting the path, removing the slash, and adding dots in between. No, not adding a dot, sorry, but adding it all together to be one singular thing. Then we continue with the best way we create routes in PHP is using the get function. Now, back to PHP. Um, in PHP, we have the following methods of collecting data. We have what we call the get method, which is used to define a route that responds to the get request. We have the post method, and then we have these days the put method, the patch method, the delete method, and then we have what we call the request method. But the ones that you should pay close attention to are these: put. No, let's first head with these ones. These three are the basic most methods that you shall be using in PHP. So most times when you are trying to get something, to retrieve something from the database, we often use the get method. It gets something out of the database, and most times that thing is pinned on the browser. And if you're trying to add something to the database, we often use the post. We always use request when you're not sure which of the two to use, whether it's get or post. So since the links that we are working on will be working on most of these requests, so we had to declare them all. We got the get, the post, and then these other ones are quite new: post, patch, delete, and then any, just in case you're not sure of which one. Is that okay? Then in PHP, arrays. Let's get into arrays. An array is something like this. If we say, let's say fruits, there's an array called fruits. and it looks like that. So this array uh, has three items: apple, banana, and orange. If you want to print out that array, you need to use print underscore r fruits, and this should be able to print this array like that. What do you notice about this? It's that by default, every array, every array in PHP, I'm sorry, by default, every array in PHP has an index which defines its position in the array. Okay? So every time you have an array in PHP, it's defined by an index starting from 0, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Now, in case you don't define that, they are auto assigned. But sometimes there's something we call associative arrays, whereby everything has been defined. For example, I can define a function and then I call it users, which is an array, and then it looks like that. Then I can say maybe ID 1032 987 and then 1128. So what have I done? I've defined the index or the ID of this. The syntax of arrays in PHP is that the first part represents the key, this first part, and then the last part represents the value. And we attach the title of a key or the value by writing its title here, then equals, then arrow to mean refers to, then the value. So that if you're to print this, I said print is print underscore r, it's the one that prints arrays. You would be able to get this in your browser. Now, what if you want to do what if you want to do maybe counting or anything in such an array? There's something we call for each loop, and that loop uh, looks through. For example, if we say for each user as users, this means that for each key as value, so we've gotten the users, and then we are using the variable user to get each item within this array. We are going to echo id and something like that. So if we come here and echo total users, at least we should be able to count the number of users in this array. So user 102, name is Alice. User uh 907. Okay, I can add. Yeah, didn't work, but it's okay. It shows that this is what we call arrays in PHP. Now back here, we had an array whereby this is the key and this is the value. And the first one is we called the method and we change the method to uppercase since it's a super global. We got the URI, which is the unique link of this thing within our system, and then we linked it to a variable called URI. And remember, we had already declared URI up here. We got the pattern, we changed it into regex format using this function regex that we had defined here. We got the handler, I believe we had declared handler up there, and then name. And this is the most important thing that we really needed. Now, as you do research about routers, routers are something that we are going to find even when we switch from PHP to another language. And the entire purpose of routers is to ensure that we map pages to their own links. So that when someone visits our website and they say they are going to, let's say, login page, then they don't need to go to That website.com slash app slash routers, is it routes and then slash view, sorry, slash blah blah blah? No, but rather everything has been predefined in router.php. Now, I hope you have a little glimpse about the basics of the PHP syntax moving forward. And now, what we are going to really do is you're going to recreate your routes. I recall you had views that you had created. Create a class called router, and that file for that class should be under core, then router.php, and add the functions that map each page. No, add the class that defines how we identify where each and everything is, how we map links to where they are, how we handle pages that don't exist, like 404 pages or pages that have errors. Map every single possibility that someone would need to go through for them to be able to access that file. Then come to views, come to app, and then create a file, call it routes.php, and within it start the actual mapping. You pages that require Most pages require both get and post, depending on what methods that will be used on such pages. Pages that just show content and they don't require someone to post content online, we use the post method. And ones um, that have forms, we use no, the ones that have just static websites, we use the get method, and the ones that have forms, we use post method. But if they have both, you have to keep on declaring both of them. And then, if you recall very well on the index page, you just call both the routes.php and the router.php. Require means that this file cannot run unless this file exists. So this app cannot run until router.php is loading and really works, as well as routes.php. Without these two files, nothing can work on this system. If you feel like at one point you're not sure about your code, instead of using require once, you use the element called include once. Then it's from here that we shall move on to creating the controllers, and I think this is exactly where I had stopped. And what's the role of the controller? A controller is now the back end code of most of these things. And the purpose of this back end code is to ensure that each and every front end file that you had created for me, let's say about.php, it it submits its content to a back-end controller. Then the back-end controller determines what happens on that very page. For example, if it has a submission page, that submission page should post to the back-end file, and then the back-end file is where we shall add integrations to the database we had created. I'm open to any questions. You can send them in the chat if you're not in a conducive environment. I'm open to any questions. So, as we go into controllers in the next phase, let's ensure that we first look at something important, and it's what we call model files. Since some of the things we are going to do are from the database we had created, we need to create models. and we shall be looking at two types of database connections that we have in PHP. The first one is called PDO, and then another one is called MySQLi. So PDO is PHP database object, and then MySQLi is the way you see it, MySQLi. But mostly the most professional one that is used by object-oriented websites and web applications is PDO, and we shall put most of our focus in PDO. So that's why we had started with with learning MySQL, so that we can create these databases and they're available. When you understand this syntax of MySQL, you can really understand the PHP of PDO. It's literally this, but with just a little dash of PHP, and that's one thing we shall look at tomorrow, very early in the morning. Since you have no questions, see you earliest